Cody James Ackland was born on the 1st of June 1997 in Paderborn, Germany, where his father was serving as a Lance Corporal with the Devonshire and Dorset Regiment in the British Army. His parents separated when he was still young and would live close to each other in the Southway area of Plymouth. Plymouth is a port city in Devon, which is in the southwest of England in the United Kingdom. As a child he struggled in school. He was diagnosed at the young age of 7 as having special educational needs. These included ADHD, dyslexia, anxiety and depression. As a result, he would end up being bullied, and by the age of 9, he said he contemplated suicide. Ackland would go on to attend Estover Community College, ironically the same secondary school as his victim, though she attended a few years after him. One of his passions growing up became playing the guitar, and he would become a gifted guitarist, eventually going on to be part of the indie rock group Rakuda, a talented group that was seemingly on the rise. They had become popular in and around the Plymouth area, and had even released their first EP, which can still be listened to on Spotify today. Ackland was the lead guitarist, and is also credited as the main songwriter of the group. Despite the vile act he would go on to commit, I have to say on listening to the music, it's actually pretty good, and they appear to have potential to go on and have some level of success in the music industry. But to pay the bills in the meantime, he worked as a car valet in a garage in Plymouth, in the valeting department. However, Ackland also had a dark and morbid obsession with true crime. At the time of his arrest, there would be well over 3,000 disturbing images found on his phone. These images included autopsies, crime scenes, and dismembered bodies. And while he would research a lot of killers, he appeared to have a particular fascination with the crimes of Ted Bundy, a renowned serial killer who was confirmed to have killed 20 women, though he confessed to over 30, and many speculate and believe that the real number could be up to, or in excess of 100. It appears Ackland would go on to commit his crime based on those committed by Bundy. His mobile phone data would also show that he searched for remote areas of Dartmoor, a fact that would prove pretty significant in the case. He also searched for items which would commonly be known as a kill kit. These items included such things as hammers, cutting tools and ski masks. He purchased some of these items which he kept in the boot of his red Ford Fiesta. With these items he went out in his car. He was now becoming a dangerous predator, just waiting for the right situation and opportunity to present itself, which it unfortunately would at a local bus stop, which is where we meet the victim in today's story. Bobbi-Anne McLeod was an 18-year-old student from Layham. Layham is located in the northwest of Plymouth itself. Bobbi-Anne lived at home with her parents Donna and Adrian, and her brother Lee. Her favourite colour was baby blue, and she had a love for the film Lilo and Stitch. Bobbi-Anne was a very small young woman, standing at just 4'11" tall and weighing around a mere 90 pounds. She could easily be mistaken for someone younger than her age. In this video taken just 2 weeks before her death, you can see just how petite and small Bobbi-Anne really was. She had aspirations in the future to go on and find a career in interior design. Bobbi-Anne was in a relationship with 21-year-old Louis Leach. They had been together around 6 months. The pair were said to be happy together and very much in love. On the evening of Saturday the 21st of November 2021, the pair had planned to meet up, along with some other friends in the city centre, for an enjoyable night out. As Bobbi-Anne left to catch the bus from a stop just a few minutes' walk away, she told her dad Adrian that she loved him, and left. Tragically, this would be the last time he, or any of her loved ones, would see her alive again. I decided to travel down to Plymouth to visit some of the key sites in this case. I wanted to get an insight into these locations, as well as pay my respects to a young victim taken from this world in the cruelest of ways. But as I drove down along the A38 nearing Plymouth, not only was I going to find this an emotionally draining day, but also a battle against the weather, as thick fog was about to hit the city. The first location I visited was the bus stop on the junction of Sheepstall Road and Bampton Road in Layham, where Bobbi-Anne would suddenly go missing. She was seen by several witnesses at the stop. She appeared to be looking up the road, waiting to see the bus arrive that would take her into town. But chillingly, someone else had driven past and decided Bobbi-Anne was to become his victim. Ackland was a complete stranger to Bobbi-Anne. There were absolutely no links between the pair, though Ackland would later state that she reminded him of an ex-girlfriend. Many claim Bobbi-Anne was a random victim, and the victim that night could have been anyone, of any age or any gender, that Ackland was just looking for a victim. But I personally don't believe that. I believe the fact she was a young woman was significant to him, particularly given the rage he was about to inflict on her, as well as his obsession with Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy's victims were all young women, and 2 girls aged just 12. I believe that Ackland wanted the full Ted Bundy experience that night, to put himself in Bundy's shoes and try and feel how Bundy would have felt. Bobbi-Anne became a mean to that selfish and sadistic end. While waiting for the bus, Bobbi-Anne had posted a picture of her feet to Snapchat, expressing how cold she was. Completely unaware she had found herself in the sights of someone intent on brutally assaulting her before that bus would arrive. He parked his car in a lane that ran directly behind and parallel to the bus stop where Bobbi-Anne was stood. He went into the boot of his car to retrieve a claw hammer. He then walked up the grassy embankment, as Bobbi-Anne was completely unaware of the imminent threat approaching. He raised the hammer and viciously struck her on the back of the head, causing her to fall to the floor. Ackland said that as she fell, she turned in his direction, and he felt their eyes meet. This didn't stop Ackland, however. He raised the hammer again, striking her on the head brutally once more. He claimed at this point he returned to his car, with the intention of driving away. But when he drove past the bus stop, he could see Bobbi-Anne semi-conscious and struggling to get to her feet, causing him to become enraged. He stopped the car and said he bundled the semi-conscious Bobbi-Anne into the footwell of the back of his car. This particular part of Ackland's story, I don't personally believe.
White sharks typically ambush their prey from below.
The strike of a great white shark lasts a mere second.
It wouldn't have known what hit it, for the great white's main weapon is surprise.
I find it much more likely that he carried out the brutal assault at the bus stop and quickly returned to his car in case anyone had witnessed the attack. Had anyone come out to help her, or even a curtain twitched, he would have been able to drive away without even retrieving her. But once he was sure no one was coming to her aid, he drove around and forced her into his car before she could properly get to her feet and walk off, or before the bus arrived. On visiting the scene, I was very surprised to see the amount of houses in that location, as well as the number of cars that drove along this road. It's far from what I would call secluded, and it's surprising that no witnesses came forward to say they heard or saw anything, as this all took place around 6:15 in the evening, although it was November and it probably was dark by that time. With Bobbi-Anne now in his car, Ackland drove around 20 miles to the next location. While driving there, Bobbi-Anne's family were now becoming concerned, as they had tried to text and call her to no response. They were a close family, and this was completely out of character for Bobbi-Anne. At 7:23, another bus arrived at that same stop. A man stepped onto the bus and handed a phone he had found on the floor to the driver. It would turn out that that phone belonged to Bobbi-Anne McLeod. Ackland then drove to the car park at Bellever Forest in Dartmoor National Park. Dartmoor is a vast area of moorland in Devon. It's around 368 square miles in size, many areas of which are secluded, which is the very reason he brought the badly injured Bobbi-Anne there. Once in the car park, he dragged Bobbi-Anne from the car and attempted to kill her by strangling her. However, this attempt failed, and so Ackland once again retrieved the claw hammer from his car and tried to lead Bobbi-Anne into the woods. She was, however, struggling to walk at this point, having already been hit with a hammer and severely strangled. So Ackland supported her to walk from his car into the forest line. The young woman at this point must have been truly terrified as he led her into the woods, as he carried a hammer in the other hand. She said to him, "I'm scared," and his reply would give us insight into the cold-hearted kind of person Ackland truly was. Instead of attempting to offer her any type of comfort in what he knew were to be her final moments, his response was, "So am I. I've never done this. I've never seen this." Ackland then began to brutally beat her around the head and face with the hammer, striking her heavily around 12 times. Though small in stature, Bobbi-Anne was a fighter, and even after the horrific hammer attack continued to breathe, clinging to life. But Ackland's sick attack continued, and he stamped on her neck, compressing it with his foot and body weight until her breathing finally stopped. Sadly for Bobbi-Anne, she had lost her fight for life. She had fought hard to stay alive, but Ackland had a sick determination to kill her, and he wasn't going to stop until he did. He then took Bobbi-Anne's handbag and some other items from the car that were covered in blood and started a fire. He burnt the items to try and hide evidence of his horrific crime. With Bobbi-Anne's deceased body now loaded into the boot of his car, Ackland drove for around 27 miles to a secluded lane that led down to Bobbi-Anne Beach Cafe. By the time I drove down to Bobbi-Anne Lane, the fog had really begun to roll in. Not only would it make filming this location difficult, but it was also incredibly eerie knowing what Ackland used this location for. I followed the long narrow lane down to the beach cafe, and looking from the car park, I could see the picturesque beach that Ackland had posted an Instagram video from, where he drank and partied with his friends. And while this video looks jovial in nature, and the kind of thing any guy in his 20s might post, it takes a darker tone when you realise it may have been the time that he thought about using that lane in any future crime, because it was in that stretch of long lane leading down to Bobbi-Anne Beach Cafe that Ackland stripped and dumped the naked deceased body of Bobbi-Anne McLeod in the thick, uninviting undergrowth that runs down the entirety of Bobbi-Anne Lane. It's not somewhere that something in the undergrowth would be easily stumbled upon. There were no signs that the young woman had been intimately violated, and Ackland later claimed the removal of her clothes and jewellery was just an attempt to make her body harder to identify if it was found. After callously discarding her body, Cody Ackland says he went home and went to sleep. Meanwhile, as he casually slept, seemingly without a care in the world, Bobbi-Anne's family were becoming frantic trying to get hold of her. Her brother Lee was constantly trying to call her, until it started going straight to voicemail around 3:45 as the battery died. The police had already been contacted, and perhaps realising the urgency, had begun searching for Bobbi-Anne since around 10 PM that evening. For me now though, I had been beaten by the fog, and I realised it was a futile exercise trying to record any more locations. One thing about the ones I'd visited though, did stand out to me. There is a huge juxtaposition between the beautiful landscapes I'd visited and the ugly, horrific murder that had taken place there. The following Sunday morning, a young boy, who actually witnessed Bobbi-Anne stood at the bus stop the night before, found Bobbi-Anne's AirPods near to the bus stop, which just helped confirm that something insidious had likely happened to the teen. Meanwhile, Ackland drove to the River Tamar, where he threw the claw hammer he had used into the water, and then threw his bloody clothes into an allotment. The remainder of his day consisted of going for pizza with friends, going to practice with the band, followed by takeaway and drinks with friends again at a pub lock-in. Indeed, his friends would go on to say that Ackland appeared to be in a particularly and unusually good mood that evening, hyped up in a way they only usually saw him before he was about to play a gig. On the following morning of Monday the 22nd of November, Ackland called into work sick, but he actually spent the day at the cinema to watch the Dune remake. Meanwhile, friends and family of Bobbi-Anne were frantic, just hoping she would come back home safely. Her brother Lee took to Facebook and shared the following post. Police have rung and someone has handed in Bobby's phone. I'm begging every single person in Plymouth to help me search everywhere, search everything. Someone has my effing sister. On the 23rd of November, Ackland sent messages to friends, family and bandmates, telling them he loved them and hinting that he had done something wrong. He left work around lunchtime and walked straight into Charles Cross Police Station, telling them he had information about the missing Bobbi-Anne. Confessing to the murder, apparently he became pale, and officers said that his eyes filled up with tears. He told police where Bobbi-Anne could be found. Ackland was immediately arrested and charged with the murder of Bobbi-Anne. Her body would be recovered a couple of hours later.
Yesterday afternoon, officers located the body of a woman in the Bobbi-Anne area of the South Hams, after information received by police led inquiries to be carried out in that area. Formal identification hasn't been carried out, but the family of 18-year-old Bobbi-Anne McLeod were informed of the development and they continue to be supported by specialist officers.
Ackland claimed at that point he confessed as he didn't want Bobbi-Anne's family to go through any more. It was an odd and sudden admission of guilt given the lengths he had gone to hide his crime. During the police interviews that followed, Ackland appeared to remain completely calm and relaxed, like he could be talking about something that happened on any other day. He talked through his crime in explicit and gory detail. At one point, talking about the vicious second hammer attack at Belvoir Forest, Ackland said, "It's not funny, but she started to make a noise. And I thought, effing hell, wow, I mean hats off to her." The news of Ackland's confession appeared to be a shock to everyone. Friends and family had no idea about his secret serial killer obsession, and to them, the Cody Ackland they knew would be one of the last people they thought would have committed such a brutal and heinous crime. As for Ackland's band Rakuda, I'm sure the news for them was a bit of a double whammy. Not only was Ackland the lead guitarist and friend to the band, but very soon it became apparent carrying on the band, particularly with the name Rakuda, would be practically impossible, given how tarnished it was by Ackland. On the 26th of November, just a few days after Ackland's confession, the band released a statement. The remaining members of Rakuda, Josh, Ross, Josh and Mike, are all extremely shocked and in complete disbelief by the tragic event that has unfolded over the last several days. Our thoughts and prayers are with Bobbi-Anne's family and friends, who must be devastated at their loss. As a mark of respect, we have decided that we will not be going forward as a band, and we will be disbanding with immediate effect. We will not be making any further comments at this time. A few weeks later, the band released another statement, thanking fans for all their support, and saying they had a view to reform in the spring of 2022 after a musical hiatus. However, it doesn't appear any attempt to reform happened. The band were clearly always going to be associated with the murder of Bobbi-Anne, and as Ackland was credited as the main songwriter in the group, realistically, the decision not to reform was probably the right one. I do have sympathy though for the remaining members, as they did absolutely nothing wrong, and appeared to have absolutely no knowledge either of Ackland's intentions, given their hard work with the band was all now for nothing. I hope all of them have found some peace and happiness, and some level of success in music away from Rakuda. On Thursday the 19th of May 2022, Cody James Ackland was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years and 190 days in prison for the murder of Bobbi-Anne McLeod. Exactly 1 week later, friends and family were finally able to lay Bobbi-Anne to rest. Hundreds of people took to the streets, and a funeral service was held at St Andrew's Church. Bobbi-Anne McLeod was just a young woman waiting at the bus stop, and in an instant, a barbaric and sudden attack changed everything for her. I cannot imagine what she went through in those final minutes or even hours. It's absolutely gut-wrenching to think about the pain and fear she would have felt. I also cannot imagine how her murder has affected all those who loved her, and I sincerely send my sympathies to her family and friends. When I visited the bus stop where Bobbi-Anne was taken, across the road was an amazing tribute to her life. Even more than 2.5 years later, her memory still shines through. The feeling I took away from there was that she was, and still is, very much loved, and Ackland's attack will never overshadow the love the whole community has for her. For Cody Ackland, I struggle to understand why someone who was just 24 at the time, was in a band, and seemingly had just about everything going for him, could throw all that away and commit such an atrocious and vile act on a young woman he didn't even know, just to feel like someone he idolised in Ted Bundy. Ackland is currently serving this sentence at Long Lartin Prison in Worcestershire. Long Lartin is a notorious Category A men's prison, and he won't be having an easy time at a prison that has housed inmates such as Charles Bronson and Reggie Cray. Personally, I don't believe Ackland should ever be released. Why should he have an opportunity to go on and have a second chance at life, while his victim, who did absolutely nothing wrong, won't get that opportunity?